Right, you lot? Every blooming time I look at this thing, it makes my cheeks ache with happiness where I just keep smiling. This is my Oxford Welder. It's an MMA or manual metal arc or stick or whatever you want to call it. That's what it is. Some people call it arc welding, but I can never get my head around that because all welding, apart from gas torch welding, uses an arc. Or maybe spot welding, but they've still got some kind of an arc. Anyway, I'm not here to discuss what you should call different types of welding. Seeing as I've been messing around with my welders recently, I got the MIG working. The MIG now works alright, apart from a bit of an issue with a brand new torch that I bought. We'll talk about that later on. I thought I probably should turn this on and give this a go. I don't really use stick or MMA all that often anymore. I used to use it a lot when I was a welder as a job. That was my occupation. That's why I had some little welders for home. Now, I did a little bit of research on these. When I bought this off a friend's friend. He was an old chap. And I think I don't generally like to talk money, but I think we're talking about 12 or 13 years ago now. I think I paid £80 for it, and I was under the impression then, and it was already about 60 years old. But that might be wrong, which means it would be 70 odd years old now. That might be wrong because the only piece of I done a small bit of research the other day when I dug this out. I dug it out because it was buried well back in the mess. And it'd been there for 10 odd years, you know, it's been sitting in the corner. I done a little bit of research on it to try and find out some actual information. And it's an RT10, Oxford RT10. And the only information that I can find is that these were sold in the 1970s. So it's nowhere near as old as I thought it was. It means it's about 40, 50 something years old, something like that. Well, 1970s. What's that, 40 something? 40? 50? No, because 80s would be 40. Yeah, probably 50 something years old now. Hopefully some of you lot will know a lot more about these than I do, or than I can find out from various forums on the internet. I dare say if I looked hard enough I would find proper information, but I just looked at some forums and some bits and bobs. Anyway, I thought it's sat there for 10 years in the corner of that garage, in the damp. I've not turned it on. It's not had any electric gone through it and all that sort of time. I'm hoping it should be. These things are built like bloody tanks. Full of oil. I've noticed that it always has a film of oil on the outside and a very thick film of oil and dirt on the top. Always. I used to keep this thing clean when I was using it. I used to wipe it with a rag all the time. And it would always build up a film of oil on the outside of it, even on the top. So I'm not going to open it up to have a look inside to make sure there's oil in it. Probably should do, really, shouldn't I? But I'm not going to, not in this video anyway. Maybe later on in another video. I'm just going to turn it on and see if it still welds. So I'll let you have a bit of a closer look at it because it's a bloody brilliant thing. Now, about 10, maybe, yeah, I think about 10 years ago, 9 years ago something, I built this trolley thing for it because it's quite a heavy and cumbersome piece of equipment here. It's quite heavy because it's full of oil, and I used to pick it up by its handles and plonk it where I needed it and then put it back. And one day I had some wheels, I had them big wheels knocking around there, so I thought I'm going to make a thing, and I had this piece of round plate and I had this piece of these bits of square bar or whatever you want to call that stuff, and I thought let's make a trolley for it. So that's what I did. I made this trolley with this little handle. Didn't really go to much effort like grinding the ends or nothing. I just cut it and stuck it together. So it's been sitting on here ever since. I put a towel under it because I didn't want the metal going on the metal in case it rusted. The towel's probably holding the moisture in and making things worse, but that's alright, we'll get around things like that. So these rods have been on here for all the time. They're absolutely covered in oil, so these are not going to be any good. I have got a packet of different rods. that we can try. What are these? What is this? This is a 6013. Can't see that. 6013. That's what I used to use all the time when I was fabricating. But these are covered in oil, so these are going to be absolutely no good whatsoever anymore. Here we go. The Oxford RT110. Oil cooled electric arc welder. It's mad that they call it arc. I was always taught in college and all through my short welding career that you know, they're not called arc welders, but it doesn't matter. I don't really care what they're called and who calls it what. This is what we've got. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a rag and I'm going to give it a clean. Let's see what we got on here. I don't know what this is for. In fact, I lied. I do know what this is for. I used to have another welder and it done TIG. And it did also do stick as well, because it was a TIG welder and you could plug, it did stick as well. And I sold that, but I've obviously, well, I sold that a good 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 7, 8 years ago. I've obviously forgotten to give them the cable for the stick. So they never said anything. So that's what that's for. And that's just another cable there, that plug in there. And I've never been a big fan of these. I don't like this type. M150. I don't like this type of holder. I like this type. And I remember this is the one I nicked. Oh, I didn't nick. I got from work when I was a welder because it broke and it wouldn't hold the rods properly. So we got a new one for the plant at work. And this old one that still worked perfectly fine, it just had a bit of tape around it. I thought that would be great for being at home, so I took it home and I put that on here. So great. Anyway, I'm going to unwrap all of this and I'm going to get a bit of rag. That's a shame that the paint's come off there. Oh man, that's a big shame. Paint's coming off of it. That's no good, is it? I'm going to have to get some green paint and try and touch that up. We'll give it a bit of a clean so we can see it properly, and then we'll plug it in. So I've got a bit of old cloth there, a bit of old rag, and I've given it a bit of a wipe over. You can see quite a lot of the paint starting to come off from around here and around there, which isn't good. So I'm definitely going to get some green paint just to touch it up. Don't really want it. I want to try and maintain it, obviously, keep it looking nice. Now this one, so it'll do 110 amps, which is what it's set on. I must have used it on 110 last. 200 to 240 volts. This says work because that's your work return, which is actually like it's your earth cable, but the proper terminology for it is work return. That's obviously, I must have had that a bit hot at some point. Anyway, so yeah, that's the work return, and this is for your electrode for your rod. That's 50 volts maximum current range. That's your amperage. And then you've got this one here, 80 volts for thin sheet special electrode twin carbon torch electrode here, but that's less amps. Only goes to 75, that one, because that's for thinner sheet and smaller electrodes. So we don't want that one, so we just do that one up and leave that like that. Make sure our earth is nice and tight, or work return if we're being prim and proper. I think we'll bring it to 95 amps for now. I'm just going to do a little bit of a test weld. I haven't really got anything to weld, so I'm literally going to do a tiny little weld on a sack barra just to see if it still strikes up and everything. I've got it plugged in, so let's flick the switch and see what happens. Starts humming. I don't know if you can hear that. The fact that it's humming is a good sign. It's on. It should hum. That's a good thing. So what I'm going to do, I've got my sack barra here. I've got a little bit of a clean spot ground off. I'm just going to run a little. That's a bit. I know it's a bit mucky there, because I was playing around the other day when the MIG decided it weren't going to work anymore. But I'm just going to. I did grind that off. I should better just see
if it's actually going to do anything though, so it's not going to be perfect, but not a lot that I do is ever perfect. Alright, so I've got here, I've got this pack of rods. This is an old pack of rods. It's been sitting around in the moisture. They're probably not any good, but try and pick one of the best ones. You can see where it's all gone soggy, because this got flooded in here. These are 70/16s. Bit thick really for the amount of amps. I might even have to turn it up to 110, but even that, it's not really going to be enough for these rods. These are a bit thick. 60/13 or less is probably what I need. But anyway, that's all we want to do, is just to see if it even strikes. Make sure that it is actually working, and then I'll get some proper rods that are actually good, new ones that are not probably been wet and covered in stuff. And we'll give it a go. Try and do some actual welding with it. Oh, that's gone rusty inside there. That's gone all rusty inside there. That ain't no good, is it? Stick that in there. Do that up. Is it going to strike? Oh, it strikes. See if it'll do any welding. Got a load of stuff inside there, so it's just spraying out sparks. But it struck up and it welded. My screen's decided it didn't want to darken particularly well during that, so that wasn't very good. Well, it did work though. Yeah, I don't think there's not enough amps in it to be able to hold a good arc with these rods. The rods are too big, but that's my opinion anyway. I need to get a new screen because it's not darkening at all now. That's why I was using my hand in the end. That's my opinion on it. You lot, by all means, please do give your opinion. 110 amps, you know, in my opinion, from, you know, a small amount of experience, a 70/16, was that 70/16? Yeah, 70/16 rod, it needs more than 110 amps, 130, 140 amps, something like that probably. I don't really know. A lot of you lot will know a lot more than me about it. I reckon if I go and get some 60/13s, or maybe less than that, and 110 amps, and I'll be alright. I can't remember, it was 60/13s that I used to use with it. I know that because we used to use 60/13s at work. That's all we used really, and I used to, about 120 amps is what I used at work for all the work that we done, and I used to bring home 60/13s if I needed to do any welding at home, and this little welder would cope fine with them, you can get a reasonable weld with a 6013. So anyway, we're 10 or more years out of date now. I dare say welding rod or electrode technology has probably moved on, as everything does, and it probably got worse, but you never know. All they essentially are is a metal stick with some flux around the outside, really. Probably some other chemicals, but that's pretty much what they are. Anyway, thanks for watching, you lot. Wasn't really much, but I just thought some of you may be interested in an old welder. So I'm going to get myself, I'm going to see if I can get I want to get the same one. I'm going to see if I can get the same screen thing, but you just got to unscrew that, because this don't work no more. It don't darken the things, just add it. So I'm going to see if I can get a new one of them at some point to put in here, because there's nothing wrong with the whole lot. So I'm just going to see if I can get a new main bit, whatever you call that, darkener, filter. That's it, filter. See if I can get a new filter. I know I was looking for the word, I just couldn't think what it was. I'll get a new filter, and then we'll actually do some proper welding. I get a bit black, a bit green paint, but oh man, just as I said earlier, just looking at this makes my cheeks hurt with why I smile so much, because it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Old piece of vintage history, really. You know, I don't know whether I told you, but I'll tell you again, and if I have told you already, I'll probably edit it out. But the one that I used to use at work, I'm pretty sure that was an Oxford. It might not have been, but it was blue, and it was the same as this but a bit bigger. And from memory, we're talking more than 10 years ago, and I was only 17, 18. I'm pretty sure that was a 400 amp rig, 400 amp plant, because it was big. You had to wheel it round, it had its own wheels. Metal thing like that, full of oil. And brilliant, you know, brilliant. I did say to my boss at the time, I did say, do you want to sell it? Of course he said no, because it was our we used it every day, every single day, to weld up the tanks, because they had to be stick welded. You weren't allowed to MIG them. You could MIG the root run for the tank, but you couldn't MIG the outside bit, like the cap and all that. First pass on the cap, you could MIG the root, but I never MIG the root. I just stick the old lot, stick the root, the pass and the cap. But it was brilliant, you know. And there's a few I've looked now. There's a few for sale on the internet, on eBay. Some of these little ones going for silly, stupid money, man, because they're old and they're good. The bigger ones, there's some of the big ones that look a lot like what was at work, but from my memory they weren't exactly the same, but they might have been. You know how memories get a bit fuzzy over the time, and you think something is clear as day, but then if you ever get the chance to go and have a look at something again, you think, that ain't how I remember it, because your memory changes slightly, doesn't it? Anyway, regardless, things like this, if I was a multi-millionaire, I'd have a big unit, and I'd have all old welders, because I love old welders. I'd have all old welders, all old sorts of things, old plant outside in the, you know, out in the fields, and I'd use the old welders to weld up the old plant if things needed to be welded up, buckets and whatever else. Just love it. Fantastic. Put in the comments one of two things. Number one, where are you watching from? Where in the world are you? Where are you watching from in the world now? Because I'd love to hear from you, wherever you are in the world. Number two, have you got any old welders? I'd love to hear the stories of your old welders. Have you got an old Oxford welder? Have you got one the same as this? Have you got one like I described, what I used to use in my old job? Big blue thing on wheels. A lot like that, big square blue box full of oil. You had two dials, but one was amps, and I can't remember what the other one was. Probably different type of amps, I can't remember. And yeah, had its own wheels. Anyway, put in the comments, what have you got, and do you like that kind of thing? Thanks for watching. You lot, treat people nice, treat people equally, and we'll all have a nice happy life. If anyone you come across is a cock, don't let them get you down, don't let them get into your head, just get rid of them and move on. And enjoy your life, because that's what matters. Cheerio, you lot. All the best.